Then we don't stop talking. Not ever. Whatever happens, whoever else is in the room, we don't go quiet on each other. 2 11-year-olds said it in a corridor that stank of troll. The date was the 1st of November 1991. It was not a spell. Because of it, an innocent man walked out of Azkaban 3 years early. A rat with 9 toes stood trial. And 6 years later, the one person who could still tell them they were wrong chose to lie instead. Subscribe if you like timelines that break in interesting ways, because this channel does nothing else. Put your guess in the comments now, while you still have no idea which one of the 3 of them breaks that promise first. Right? The corridor. The troll had been down for about 20 minutes. Its club lay across the flagstones where Harry had dropped it, and the whole second floor smelled like old socks and wet stone. Professor McGonagall stood in the doorway, with her lips pressed so thin they had almost disappeared. She had asked the obvious question: why were 3 first years in a bathroom with a mountain troll? And Hermione Granger, who had never lied to a teacher in her life, said she had gone looking for the troll on purpose. She had read about them. She thought she could handle it. Harry watched her say it. That was the part he thought about later, for years, at odd moments. Not the troll, not the club coming down. Just the way her voice went completely flat, while she took the blame for something she had not done, in front of a woman she admired more than anyone in the castle. She lost 5 points. Harry and Ron won 10. And the 3 of them walked back to Gryffindor Tower without speaking, because none of them knew what you were supposed to say after that. Ron fell asleep in an armchair by the fire before midnight, still holding a chocolate frog he had not opened. Most of the house went up to bed. The fire burned down to the orange stage where it gives more light than heat. Harry did not go up. He sat on the hearthrug with his back against the stone and waited, and he could not have told you what he was waiting for. At about 1 in the morning, Hermione came back down the girls' staircase in her dressing gown, carrying a plain paper exercise book and a muggle pen. "You're awake," she said. "So are you." "I can't sleep. I keep doing the sums." "What sums?" She sat down on the rug, which he had never seen her do, because she always chose a chair and sat in it properly. She put the exercise book on her knees and opened it to the first page, and here is where the timeline forks. Not at the troll. 25 minutes after it, on a rug, over an exercise book that cost £1.20 in a stationer's in Hampstead. The 1st of November, 1991. 3 people knew something, Hermione said. That's what I keep coming back to. 3 people each knew one piece of it, and not one of them knew all 3. Harry rubbed his eyes. "You've lost me." Professor Quirrell knew there was a troll because he was the one who told everybody. She wrote while she talked, in that small upright hand, every letter the same height. Professor Dumbledore knew the troll had to have come in through a door because trolls don't climb, and Professor Snape knew where the door was. That's why he went straight up to the 3rd floor, while everyone else went down to the dungeons. I watched him go. "You watched him go," Harry said, "in the middle of a troll. I notice things. It's not a crime," she kept writing. "My point is that they had it. Between the 3 of them, they had the whole picture, and nobody put the pieces on the same table. So a troll got into a school and nearly killed me in a bathroom." Harry looked at the top of her head. Her hair had troll in it. "Is that why you lied to McGonagall?" Hermione stopped writing. "I lied to Professor McGonagall," she said carefully, "because you 2 came to get me, and you didn't have to. And because if I'd told her the truth, she'd have asked why I was crying in a bathroom. Then I'd have had to tell her what Ron said about me having no friends. And that would have been the end of Ron. Ron didn't mean it. I know he didn't mean it. That's not the same as it not being true. She said it without any drama at all, and that was somehow worse. I've never had a friend before, Harry. Not one. I've had people who let me sit near them." Harry thought about 10 years of Dudley's spare bedroom and the cupboard before it. He thought about a boy called Piers Polkiss, who used to hold his arms. He had spent 9 weeks now in a castle where 2 people saved his seat at breakfast, and he had already started being frightened of losing it. "Same," he said. She glanced up at him. "Same, not one." Neither of them said anything for a while. A log split in the grate. Ron muttered something about spiders in his sleep, which they both ignored, because at 11, you do not yet understand that some things happen twice. Then we should have a rule, Hermione said suddenly. A rule. About the pieces. About not putting them on the same table. She turned the exercise book round so he could see the page. She had ruled 2 neat columns down it, the way you would for a science practical. I want us to write down everything either of us finds out. Both of us. Every time. Even the stupid parts. Especially the stupid parts, actually. Because the stupid parts are how I knew about Snape. That's not a rule. That's homework. Then here's the rule. She looked straight at him. We don't go quiet on each other, ever, however bad it is. If I think you're being an idiot, I'll say so to your face that day. If you think I'm unbearable, you say it to mine. And then we are still talking the next morning. No sulking, no walking off, no waiting for the other person to say sorry first. Harry laughed, mostly out of nerves. You've thought about this a lot for 20 minutes. I've thought about it for 11 years. She did not laugh. People stop talking to me, Harry. That's the whole shape of my life so far. They don't shout. They just go quiet. And the quiet gets bigger. And then one day it's permanent. And nobody ever said a single word about it. I would rather have a row. I would much rather have a row. And that right there is the sentence that changes the war. Remember it. It comes back. All right, Harry said. All right? All right. Deal. He held out his hand, which felt ridiculous. So he pulled it back and then put it out again. Say it properly, though. So, we both know what we agreed. So she said it properly. On the rug, at 1 a.m, with Troll in her hair. We don't stop talking, not ever. Whatever happens, whoever else is in the room, we don't go quiet on each other. We don't go quiet, Harry said. Then they shook hands, like 2 small adults closing a deal on a car. Hermione wrote the date at the top of the page and both their names under it. That was the whole ceremony. Ron slept through all of it. That is not a metaphor, and it is not anybody being cruel. He was tired. He had run down 2 flights of stairs and locked a troll in a bathroom. And he was 12 stone of 11-year-old boy asleep in a chair. Harry looked over at him at one point and had the entirely clear thought that they should wake him up and make it 3 names instead of 2. He did not do it. It seemed unkind to wake him. And the next morning was a Sunday. There were kippers. Ron was telling the story of the club to a second year with his mouth full. Bringing up a solemn pact made at 1 a.m. would have felt like showing someone your diary, so the page stayed at 2 names. And here's the part I still think about. Nobody in this story does anything wrong on the 1st of November 1991. Nobody betrays anybody. 2 lonely children invent the most reasonable rule 2 lonely children have ever invented. And the one thing they forget to do is the one thing that would have cost them nothing at all. By the end of that first week, the exercise book had 11 pages in it. Snape's limp, the 3-headed dog, the trapdoor, the date of Halloween, a note in Hermione's hand, reading, Quirrell told everyone about the troll. Why would he do that? Ask H. By Christmas it had 40 pages, and the 2 of them had started finishing each other's sentences at breakfast. Ron noticed that in December. He noticed it before either of them did. The 27th of December, 1991. Hermione went home for Christmas. Her parents had booked a skiing holiday. She cried about it in the library on the last Thursday of term, quietly, behind a shelf of atlases. Then she washed her face and went to Charms, which meant Ron Weasley got Harry Potter to himself for a fortnight. Ron would like it on the record that it was the best fortnight of his life to that point. There were 4 Weasleys in the castle over Christmas, and roughly 900 people not in it. They played exploding Snap until 2 a.m. Fred set fire to a curtain. Ron won a chess game against Bill by post. He ate so much at Christmas dinner that Percy told him he was going to die, and Harry laughed at Ron's jokes, all of them, including the bad ones, in a way that made Ron feel about 6 inches taller in the chest. They were playing chess on the 27th, on the rug by the fire, with the board balanced on a copy of Quidditch Through the Ages. You're doing it again, Ron said. Doing what? Moving the knight where I want you to move it. Ron nudged a bishop forward. The bishop grumbled. You've got a really bad habit, that. You go for the move that looks brave. That's not a bad habit. It is in chess. Ron sat back on his heels. Look, everybody plays like they're trying to keep all their stuff. That's why everybody's rubbish. The whole game turns on whether you're willing to lose a piece on purpose and mean it, and not flinch when it goes. Harry looked at the board properly for the first time. You're going to take my castle. I'm going to take your castle in 3 moves, and you're going to let me, because you'll be busy saving your queen. Ron shrugged. Nobody ever thanks the piece. An 11-year-old said that in December of 1991. If you remember one line from this whole story, make it that one. It comes back at the very end, and it comes back hard. Harry lost his castle, then he lost the game, then he lost the next 2. On the 3rd night of the holidays, Harry had told Ron about the mirror. On the 27th, they went and found it again. It stood down a corridor Ron had never walked, in a room with no other furniture in it. It was tall as the ceiling, with a gold frame and clawed feet, and there was writing carved round the top that neither of them could read. Harry stood in front of it and went very still, the way he did. My mum's there, he said, and my dad, and loads of them behind, going back. Ron did not know what to say to that, so he said, right, and then hated himself for it. You look. Ron did not want to look. He wanted to look so badly that his ears had gone hot. He stepped in front of the glass and put his hands in his pockets so they would stop doing anything. And there he was. He was older. He was taller than Bill. He was wearing the badge, the actual head boy badge. He held the Quidditch cup, and he stood at the front of a crowd where nobody else was quite in focus. Just him, in front, with the light on him. Well, said Harry. I'm head boy, Ron said, and I've won the cup. And I look, you know, decent. That's brilliant. Yeah, Ron kept looking at it. It's just me, though. There's a load of people behind, but they're sort of blurry. It's just me at the front. He heard how that sounded about half a second after he said it. That's what you want then, Harry said. To be first. No. Ron thought about it. To be looked at first. It's different. Bill's a curse breaker, and Charlie's got dragons, and Percy's got the badge, and Fred and George have got each other, and I've got what? I'm the 6th one. Mum bought me Percy's old rat. Then he laughed, because that is what Ron did with a true thing, once it was out of his mouth, and he said, anyway, it's a stupid mirror. It doesn't even do anything. It shows you what you want. Then it's a horrible mirror. Ron stepped back from it. Come on, I'm freezing. They went back up, and on the stairs, Ron said the thing he had been carrying around since the beginning of December. You two have got a book. Harry missed a step. What? You and Hermione. You've got a paper book with no magic in it, and you pass it back and forth in herbology, and you both write in it. Ron said it lightly, which took effort. Fred spotted it first. He thought it was, you know, something else. It's just notes about the trapdoor, about Snape. I know what it is. I'm not thick. They came out onto the landing. You know you do the sentences thing now. You'll go. It might be under there. And she'll go. The 3rd floor. And you'll both just carry on. You did it at breakfast twice. Harry stopped. Do you want to be in the book? And this is the moment, not the mirror. Here, on a landing, with a portrait of a monk pretending to be asleep 6 feet away. Because Harry meant it. Harry would have said yes on the spot. He would have walked back down and got the book and written Ron's name under the other 2 that night and been glad about it. But Ron heard the question the way it sounded, which was, do you want us to make room for you? And there is a version of 11-year-old Ron Weasley who says, yes, please. That version has 5 older brothers who have taught him with total efficiency and no malice at all that asking to be included is the single most humiliating thing a person can do. Nah, Ron said. It's your homework club. I'd rather eat. Harry laughed. Ron laughed. It was fine. It was completely fine. And they went to bed. And neither of them thought about it again for years. Ron lay awake for a while after that, though, listening to Scabbers scratching about in the bottom of his cage. And he made himself a promise of his own. He did not write it down. He never told anybody. Not for 6 years. He would decide that night what he was going to be for the 2 of them, and he stuck to it so well and so quietly that by 1997 it nearly killed him. Hermione came back on the 4th of January with a leather folder, 32 pages of notes on alchemists, and the name Nicola Flamel. The 4th of June, 1992. Fluffy was asleep. The harp was still playing. Ron had a broken leg. That last part happened on the giant chessboard. The White Queen brought her stone arm round and took him off the horse. That was the plan. Ron had seen the sacrifice 4 moves out and taken it, without saying a word about it first. Harry and Hermione dragged him to the wall. He was grey, and his shin was wrong. "Go on," Ron said. "Get on with it. I'm not going anywhere." So they went through into the little room. Purple fire came up behind them, and black fire in front. There was a table with 7 bottles on it, and a scroll. Hermione read the scroll twice and then laughed out loud. Harry never forgot the sound. It was pure delight, in a stone room, with a wall of fire behind her. "It's logic," she said. "It's not even magic. Most wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck in here forever." She worked it out. In under 2 minutes, the smallest bottle went forward, the round one at the end went back, and then she measured the smallest bottle against her thumb and stopped laughing. "There's 1 swallow," she said. One. She held it up. There was about 1 inch of it. "It's enough for 1 person to go through, Harry. That's not me being modest. Look at it." Harry looked at it. "Here is where the promise met a wall, and the wall won, and that matters enormously later, so hold on to it. The rule those 2 made in November was not magic. It could not conjure a second dose. All it could do was decide what happened in the 90 seconds before he drank." "Right," Hermione said. 90 seconds. Everything I've got. Don't interrupt." And she gave him all of it, fast, in the order she had been keeping it in her head since Christmas. That Quirrell had told the whole school about the troll himself, which is not what a frightened man does. That the stammer came and went, and it went when he was giving orders. That Snape had been trying to work out what Quirrell was doing, not doing it himself, and that Harry was going to hate hearing that later. And then the last thing, which was the one that mattered. "The mirror shows you what you want," Hermione said. "That's all it does. So he's going to stand in front of it and want to use the stone, and he won't be able to get it because that's not the same as wanting to find it. Do you understand the difference? Don't want to use it. Want to have found it. Want it in your pocket and nothing else. Want to have found it," Harry said. "Say it again. Want to have found it and not use it. Good." She put the bottle in his hand and closed his fingers round it. "I'm going back for Ron. I'm sending an owl to Professor Dumbledore, and you're not going to die, because I would find that extremely inconvenient." Then she went, and Harry drank the inch of potion and walked into the black fire. 20 minutes later, a man with 2 faces stood in front of the mirror of arrest and screamed at it. Behind him stood an 11-year-old boy with his hands in his pockets. He already knew exactly what to think about. He wanted to have found it. He did not want to use it. And a heavy, bloody stone dropped into his pocket like a conker. Nobody ever put that in a book. In every telling of that night that anyone in Wizarding Britain would ever read, Harry Potter worked it out alone in front of the glass, brilliantly, by instinct, under pressure, and he did work it out, fine. But he worked it out in a stone room 90 seconds earlier, out loud, with a girl beside him. She had been carrying the answer in her head for 5 months because the 2 of them had made a rule about pieces on the same table. He still nearly died. Quirrell got both hands round his throat and burned for it. And the last thing Harry remembered was a face coming loose. He woke up 3 days later in the hospital wing with every sweet in Britain on the bedside table. And this next bit is the actual price of chapter 1. And almost nobody sees it coming because it does not look like a price at all. It looks like an old man being kind. Professor Dumbledore came in and sat down on the end of the bed. And for a while they talked about sweets. Then Harry asked why Voldemort had wanted to kill him when he was a baby. "Alas," Dumbledore said, "the first thing you ask me is the one thing I cannot tell you today. Not today. Not for some years, I think." He looked at the pile of chocolate frogs. "You will be very angry with me about that eventually. I have decided to accept it." Harry did not know what to do with that, so he asked about the mirror instead, and Dumbledore explained it, and then went quiet for a moment. "May I ask you something in return? You knew what to want in front of the glass. That is not a small thing. Did you work it out there or before?" "Before," Harry said. "Hermione worked it out. She told me right before I drank the potion." "Ah, is that bad?" "It is remarkable." Dumbledore said it warmly, and he meant it. And then he said the other part, which he also meant. Tell me, does Miss Granger know everything that you know? Harry thought about it, and found that the answer was simply yes, with nothing left over. Yes. And you know everything she knows. That's the arrangement. Yes. Dumbledore folded his hands. Then I shall have to think rather carefully about what I tell you, Harry. And I want you to understand that this is not a punishment. A secret held by one boy is a secret. A secret held by two children who tell each other everything is only news that has not happened yet. Sir, she'd never. I know she would never. He stood up and he looked tired. That is precisely the difficulty. She is loyal to you before she is loyal to me. And so are you. And you are both entirely right to be. I am glad you are not alone. I want you to know that I mean that. He paused at the end of the bed. It also makes my work considerably harder. Eat the beans. Some of them are dreadful. Then he left, and Harry lay there feeling as if he had been praised and fined at the same time. Nobody ever wrote that conversation down. There is no record of it anywhere, but it is the reason a great many things happened later and did not happen earlier. If you want the one sentence that explains the next 6 years, it is that one. Two children who tell each other everything. Dumbledore did not stop telling Harry things. He slowed down. He held back a prophecy for 4 extra years. He kept a name to himself, and every time he chose to wait, he was making a perfectly reasonable decision about a girl with very neat handwriting, who had never done a disloyal thing in her life. Ron got out of the hospital wing on the 6th of June with a leg that clicked in cold weather for the rest of his life. Nobody ever asked him about the sacrifice. There was a feast and points and a photograph in the Prophet with 2 people in it. The 8th of May, 1993. By the spring of second year, the exercise book had become 3 exercise books, and Ron had read all of them. That was his own doing. He had never asked to be in the book, so instead he had quietly made himself the person who read it. He would pick it up off the table while they were arguing about something else, and go through it back to front. Then he would say things like, "You have written cat down twice," or "Why has nobody asked Filch?" Nobody had asked Filch. That was Ron. That was Ron all over. On the 5th of May, in the corner of the library nearest the window, the 3 of them had the conversation that should have ended the whole business. "Snake," Harry said. "It's a snake. It has to be a snake. I can hear it. Nobody else can hear it. And I can talk to snakes." Hermione had the book open on her knees and was writing so fast her wrist was smudging. Which snake, though? That's the question. Something that kills by looking. Colin had a camera up, and he only got petrified. Justin was behind nearly headless Nick, and Nick's already dead, so he only got scorched. She stopped writing. Something that lives 1,000 years in a castle with no light and no food. "Spiders," Ron said. They both turned round. "What? Spiders?" Ron was sitting backwards on a chair with his chin on the rail. "They're all going. There were about 900 in the 3rd floor bathroom in September, and now there's none. And they're all heading out the same window, all in a line, like they're leaving a pub at closing. Hagrid said something about it. I only notice because I hate them." Hermione stared at him. Then she went to the shelf and came back with a book on magical beasts, and turned to a page and read 4 lines and put her hand flat on the paper. "Basilisk," she said, "the king of serpents. It kills with a look. Spiders flee before it, and it can live for hundreds of years." And that is how they knew, in this timeline, on the 5th of May, 1993. Not from a page torn out of a library book by a girl running for her life. From a boy who hated spiders. Saying so out loud, in front of 2 people who wrote everything down. They were a week early, remember that. A whole week. They took it to Professor McGonagall the same evening, all 3 of them. And she listened to the entire thing standing up with her hands behind her back. "A basilisk," she said. "Yes, Professor. In the plumbing." "It has to be the plumbing," Hermione said. "It's the only thing that goes everywhere in the castle without a door. That's why the attacks are always near water." McGonagall was quiet for a long moment. "Miss Granger, I have taught in this castle for 39 years. She sat down. In 3 of those years, I would have sent you to bed with a detention for that. This is not one of them. Wait here." She wrote 2 letters, and she cancelled all evening activities from the following morning, and she began escorting students to lessons in groups, and she went to the headmaster. And that was the moment when this timeline could have ended clean and small, and it did not, for a reason nobody in the room could have guessed. Because the school governors removed Albus Dumbledore on the 7th of May. Lucius Malfoy had 12 signatures. Hagrid was taken to Azkaban the same night. And the man who could have walked down to a bathroom on the 2nd floor and settled the whole thing before dinner was suddenly a private citizen with no key to his own office. Ron remembered the exact moment he understood it was going wrong. He was in the common room, and Harry and Hermione were sitting on the same sofa with the book between them. And they were both talking at once, and finishing it, the way they did. "If it moves through the pipes, then it comes out somewhere," Hermione said. "There has to be an opening big enough. And there's only one bathroom nobody uses. Because it flooded. Because it's always flooded. Because something big has been coming up through it for a year," Harry said. "I want to look at the taps." "Tonight." "Tonight," Hermione said. And she was already up. "No," said Ron. They both turned round again, and Ron would remember the 2 identical faces for a long time. Not annoyed, just delayed both of them, in exactly the same way. "Ron, we're not going in. We're looking at the sinks." "I heard you." Ron stood up. "Here's the thing. You 2 have already decided. You decided it sitting there, between yourselves, in about 11 seconds, and then you told me. That's not the same as asking me." "We are asking you," Hermione said. "No, you're informing me, and then being surprised I've got a face about it." He heard his own voice go up and could not stop it. "Dumbledore got sacked yesterday. There's a bloke in Azkaban tonight who did nothing. Whoever's doing this has got a clear run, and they know somebody's onto them. Because McGonagall's marching the whole school around in lines. Tonight is the worst night of the entire year to be in a corridor. Any of us, especially her." "Why, especially me?" said Hermione. Ron did not want to say it. He said it. "Because you're Muggle-born, and every message on that wall has been about that. And you're the cleverest one in the school, and everybody knows it. If I wanted to frighten this castle properly, you're who I'd go for." Nobody said anything for a bit. "He's right," Harry said. "He's right about the risk," said Hermione. "He isn't right about waiting. Ron, if we wait a week, somebody else is in that corridor instead of us, and they won't be carrying anything." And then she went and got her mirror. That part is true in every version of this story, and it is the part people forget when they talk about Hermione Granger. She did not walk down that corridor because she was reckless. She walked down it holding a small round mirror out at arm's length, checking every corner before she turned it. She had worked out something simple. If a thing kills by looking, you can look at it sideways. The mirror is why she is alive. The mirror is entirely her own idea, and she had it in her hand. And the reflection came up round the corner of the corridor. By the library at 11 minutes past 9, Ron found her 20 minutes later, because he had followed her. Of course he had followed her. He had lost the argument and gone up to bed, and lain there for 11 minutes, and then put his shoes back on. She was on the floor with her arm out and her fingers still curled round the mirror. Penelope Clearwater lay a few feet away, both of them hard as statues, both of them with their eyes open, and in her other hand, folded small, was a page from the exercise book. Harry's terrible handwriting on one side, asking her to check whether the pipes in that corridor ran up from the 2nd floor, her own on the other, neat as printing, 3 words long, they do. Basilisk. Ron sat down on the flagstones next to her and did not move for a while. He was still there when Professor Snape arrived, before McGonagall, before Madame Pomfrey, at a speed that Ron thought about for years afterwards. Snape looked at the 2 petrified girls. Then he looked at Ron sitting on the floor. Where are the other 2? Common room. Harry's in the common room. She came on her own. On her own. Snape's voice did not change at all. You told them not to go. Ron looked up. How do you know that? Because you were sitting on a cold floor at 9:30, with your shoes on the wrong feet, and because you are the only one of the 3 of you who is still capable of being surprised. Snape crouched, took the mirror out of Hermione's hand and turned it over once. They arrive at conclusions together. It makes them fast. It also makes them a single object, and a single object can be aimed at. That's a horrible thing to say. It is an accurate thing to say. I find those overlap more than people care for. Snape stood. Go to your dormitory. Take nothing with you and tell no one you were here. Ron went. And on the stairs, he understood, with the total clarity, you only get twice or 3 times in a life, exactly what job he was going to have to do for the next 6 years. Someone was going to have to be the one who was surprised. The 15th of January 1994, Hermione Granger had told a teacher about the broomstick, and she had known while she was doing it that she was going to lose something for it. She did it anyway. A man who had killed 13 people with one curse was somewhere in Scotland, and somebody had posted a racing broom to a 13-year-old boy with no note attached. Harry found out at 4 in the afternoon. He came up the stairs from the pitch with his boots still on and crossed the common room to where she was sitting, and about 40 people stopped talking. You told McGonagall? Yes. You told her before you told me? Yes. Hermione put her quill down. Her hands had gone cold. I went straight there. I didn't wait. If I'd waited, I'd have talked myself out of it. And that would have been the wrong thing. It's my dad's kind of broom. Harry's voice was low and flat, and not at all like him. It's the only present anyone's ever sent me, and you gave it to a teacher to take apart. Do you know what they do? They strip them. They take the twigs out, one at a time. I know exactly what they do. I looked it up before I went. That's worse. I know it's worse. She stood up, because she was not going to have it sitting down. You want me to say I'm sorry? I'm not going to. I'm sorry you're standing there looking like that, and I would do it again tomorrow. And both of those are true at the same time. He's my godfather's. He's whoever sent it. Harry stopped. He was shaking. You had no right. I had no right. And I did it. And you can be furious with me for the whole term. I am furious with you. Good. Be furious out loud. Hermione's voice cracked on the last word. Be furious right here in front of Lavender and everybody, and shout at me, and call me whatever you like. Just do not go upstairs and stop talking to me, because that's the only thing I actually can't take. And you know it. And you promised. The common room was extremely quiet. Harry stood there, with his broomless hands hanging by his sides. And here is the whole hinge of this story, in one small physical action, so try to picture it properly. He pulled out the chair opposite her, and sat down in it, hard, and said, "Right, then I'm going to be furious with you for about an hour." He was. It went on for an hour and 11 minutes. It was ugly in places. He said she always thought she knew best, and that was unfair and mostly true. She said he confused being brave with being right, and that was unfair and completely true. Fred wandered past twice and made popcorn noises. Nobody left. And at the end of it, Harry said, "I still think you were wrong." And Hermione said, "I know." And they went to dinner together, and that was that. The firebolt stayed in McGonagall's office until the end of February. It came back with every twig intact, and a note from Madame Hooch saying it was the finest broom she had ever flown, which Harry pretended not to be pleased about. In the actual history of this timeline, that argument on the 15th of January is more important than the Sirius Black hearing. Everything that follows is downstream of an hour and 11 minutes of two 13-year-olds shouting at each other and refusing to leave the room, because Ron did not shout. Ron had not spoken to Hermione since the 3rd of January, and his reason was better than Harry's, and nobody in the castle was giving him any credit for it. Her cat had been going for his rat since October. There were ginger hairs on his bed cover, and there was blood on the sheets, and Scabbers had been gone for 11 days. Scabbers was 12 years old and bald in places. He had come to Ron second-hand from Percy, along with a cage that did not shut properly. And he was the only thing Ron had ever owned that had not been somebody else's first, so Ron went quiet. He was 13, and he was grieving a rat, and he did not have the words, and the quiet was the only thing he had. That is the part every version of this story gets wrong, so hear it plainly. Ron Weasley did not stop talking to Hermione Granger out of spite. He stopped because something he loved had been eaten, and because when he tried to say so, two people who agreed with each other explained to him kindly and at length that cats do that. On the 15th of January, at about 11 at night, Hermione went and sat on the floor of the corridor outside the boys' dormitory and cried until she could not breathe properly. Harry found her there. He sat down beside her on the flagstones. "Right," he said. "What is it actually? Because it isn't the broom." And she told him. "I've got a time turner," Hermione said. Harry said nothing at all for about 6 seconds. "A what?" "Professor McGonagall gave it to me in September, so I could do all my subjects. It's on a chain. It hangs round my neck under my shirt, and you have never once noticed it, because nobody ever does." She wiped her face with her sleeve. "It turns time back. Not far. An hour, 2 hours, 5, if you are extremely careful. There are rules, and the rules are terrifying. And the worst one is that you cannot be seen. People who see themselves do dreadful things to their own heads. You've been," Harry said slowly, "going back. Every day. Since September." "Most days. Twice. On Mondays." "Hermione, how long has today been?" "Today," she said, "has been about 31 hours. And Harry Potter, 13 years old, sitting on a cold floor at midnight, did not say anything clever. He said the practical thing. That was always what he was for. "When did you last sleep for a whole night?" "August." That is a real answer. And it is the exact moment the price of this arrangement started showing up on her body. Two people who tell each other everything eventually get told everything. And everything includes the things you were planning to carry on your own until they killed you. She had lost a stone in weight. Her hands shook in the mornings. She had cried in 3 separate cupboards since Christmas. And she had a system for which cupboards. "You're giving it back," Harry said. "I'm not giving it back. You are giving it back at Easter. Until then, you're dropping Muggle studies. And if you argue with me, I'm telling McGonagall. And I will do it, Hermione. I absolutely will." He paused. "I have recently been informed that telling a teacher is a legitimate thing a friend can do." Hermione laughed. It came out mostly as a sob. And then it was a laugh. "That's a horrible thing to say to me. It's an accurate thing to say." They sat there for a while. Somewhere below them, the fire was going out. "Harry," she said, "ask me the other thing." "What other thing?" "You've got the face. You've had the face for a minute." So he asked it. And it is the question that ends Sirius Black's sentence. And it took 8 words. "What have you seen? Being in twice?" Because that is what a time turner really is, once you stop thinking about lessons. It is not a machine for going back. It is a machine for standing in the same corridor twice and noticing what changed. "Things that don't add up," Hermione said. She sat up straighter and her voice changed gear, and Harry knew that gear. "I've been meaning to write them in the book for weeks, and I keep not doing it because there's no pattern to them. Professor Lupin goes into his office at 11 and comes out at 10 past, twice. There's a corridor on the 4th floor where the map and the actual wall disagree. And on the 9th of December, I walked past the fat lady at 8:30, and then again at 8:30. The second time there was a knife mark on her frame. It was not there the first time, and she didn't get slashed until January." Harry sat very still. "Say the last one again." She said it again. "So, he was in the castle in December," Harry said. "He was inside in December, weeks before anyone knew, and he did not come near me." "No. Then what's he coming for?" Neither of them had the answer that night. They had it 8 weeks later, and when they got it, the answer was asleep in a shoebox in Hagrid's hut, and it had been in Ron Weasley's bed for 3 years, the 19th of March, 1994. The thing about the map was that it did not care what shape you were. Fred and George had given it to Harry at Christmas. That was either the single greatest act of generosity in Weasley history, or the single greatest act of getting rid of the evidence. It depended on which twin you asked. It was old parchment, folded in 8, and along the top, 4 boys had signed themselves in nonsense names. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, Prongs, 4 different hands, all of them showing off. Harry had looked at that handwriting for 3 months without once wondering who had written it, and it showed everybody. That was the point of it. Filch in his office, Mrs. Norris on the 3rd floor, 400 small labelled dots going about their day, and it labelled them with their names, not their faces. Ron got Scabbers back on the 16th of March. Hagrid had found the rat in his cabbages, thin and shivering, and kept him in a shoebox with a hot water bottle. Then he sent Ron a note in enormous letters saying he ought to come and get his animal. And Ron came down and picked him up and put him inside his jacket and did not say anything to Hagrid for a moment. And Hagrid pretended to be busy with the kettle. Then Ron carried him back up to the castle and put him on the table in the common room in front of Hermione. "He's not dead," Ron said. "I can see that. Your cat didn't get him." "No." "Right." Ron stood there. "So?" "Ron, I am so sorry. Don't." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Don't do a big thing. Just next time I say a thing about my own rat, don't the two of you look at each other first." "We look at each other first," Hermione said. "Do we do that?" "Every single time." Ron sat down. "It's not look. It's not a crime. You've got the book and I haven't, and that's my own fault. But you do it, and it means whatever I've said is already halfway to being answered before I've finished saying it." And nobody had anything to reply to that, because it was true. Harry got the map out that night, mostly to change the subject. He was going to show Ron the passage behind the mirror on the 4th floor. He unfolded it on the hearthrug and put his wand light on it. Ron leaned over with the rat on his shoulder, chewing something. The three of them looked down at 400 little dots. "There's us," Ron said. "There's Neville. Why's Neville in the kitchens?" Then Hermione said in a completely ordinary voice, "Harry, who is Peter Pettigrew?" Harry looked where she was looking. There was a dot on the hearthrug in the Gryffindor common room. It was standing exactly where Ron was standing. The little label beside it, written in the same showing off hand as the signature at the top, said Peter Pettigrew. Nobody moved. "Ron," Harry said very quietly, "don't do anything. Just tell me where the rat is." "He's on my shoulder." "Right." Ron looked at the map. Then he looked at his own shoulder. Then he looked at the map again, and the colour came off his face in about a second and a half. "That's a joke," he said. "Tell me that's the twins." "The twins can't write on it. Nobody can write on it." Hermione had gone down on her knees over the parchment. "It isn't a drawing, Ron. It's a spell that reports. It doesn't know what shape anything is. It only knows who. He's been in my bed." "Yes. He's been in my bed for 3 years. He sleeps on the pillow. Percy had him before that." Ron's voice was going somewhere strange. "I've told him things. When I was 10, I told him things. And this is the bit I have wanted to get to since the beginning of this video. So let me slow down. In every other version of this night, 3 children take a rat down a tunnel in the dark. They hand it to a werewolf and a man out of Azkaban. Everything after that depends on Ron's leg, and a full moon, and luck. It fails. Peter Pettigrew crawls into a hedge and eventually helps to restart a war. That is not what happens here. And the reason is a girl who could not walk without shaking, and a boy who had shouted at her for an hour in January and had not stopped speaking to her. "We're not going anywhere," Hermione said. "Sit down, both of you." "Ron, put him in something with a lid. You want to just sit here? I want to write it down." She already had the book. "Because we are holding a living man in a shoebox, and that means we are not holding a secret anymore. We are holding evidence." The 2nd of April, 1994. They gave him to a teacher. That is the whole trick. And it took a 13-year-old girl about 4 minutes to see it. And it had not occurred to anybody in 12 years. They did it in 3 steps, and the order matters. First, they went to Professor Lupin at 9 in the morning with the map open and a rat in a biscuit tin with holes punched in the lid. Lupin was marking essays. He looked at the map on his desk for a long time without touching it. Then he read the 4 names along the top, and Harry watched a grown man's face go the colour of the parchment. "Where did you get this?" "Fred and George Weasley." "Sir, whose handwriting is that?" "Mine," Lupin said. "The first one is mine." Then he sat down, and he told them badly, in the wrong order, with his hands flat on the desk, that 4 boys had made it, that 2 of them had learned to turn themselves into animals, to keep a friend company once a month, that they had never registered it with anybody because they were 16 and thought they were funny, that one of them had been a stag and one had been an enormous black dog, and one, Harry said, was a rat. Peter was a rat. Lupin's voice had gone strange. Peter Pettigrew was the smallest of us and the least brave, and we loved him. He died in a street in 1981. They found one of his fingers. "Sir," said Ron, "which finger?" I beg your pardon? Ron reached over and took the lid off the biscuit tin. He picked the rat up with both hands gently, the way you pick up something you have had since you were 10, and he turned it over and held out one front paw. Because he's short of toe, Ron said. He's always been short of toe. I thought he was born like it. Remus Lupin put both hands over his face. That is the entire case, by the way. Everything else is paperwork. A rat missing exactly the piece of himself that was buried with honours in 1981. They spent 2 hours in that office, and when they came out they had 4 more things. That Sirius Black had been made the Potter's secret keeper, which meant the Fidelius charm had been performed, which meant only the secret keeper could have given the house away. That a secret keeper can be changed at the last minute in private by the people involved, and nobody outside would ever know it had happened. That Lupin himself would testify, and that his word was close to worthless, and that he said so first, flatly, before anyone else could. I am a werewolf, he said. I am not registered as anything else. Put me in front of the Wizengamot, and I will help them not believe you. Do not use me until the end. And the fourth thing was the one nobody expected, and it was Hermione who asked for it. Professor, she said, did anyone ever ask Sirius Black anything? In a room, with a quill going? Lupin looked up. No, he said. There was no trial. There was never a trial. It was the second week of November, and there were bodies in the street. And Bartemius Crouch was signing committal orders 11 at a time. I've thought about that for 12 years, and I've never once said it out loud to another person. Second step. They went to the headmaster's office at 4 in the afternoon, all 3 of them, and Professor McGonagall took them up herself with her mouth in a very straight line. Dumbledore listened to the whole thing. Then he sat back and did something Harry had never seen him do, which was look genuinely old. May I see the animal? Ron handed over the tin. Dumbledore looked inside it for perhaps 4 seconds and gave it back. Ah, he said. Yes. Hello, Peter. Nobody said anything. I want to tell you something unpleasant about myself, Dumbledore said, and I would like you to hear it before you decide what to do next. In November of 1981, the Ministry asked me whether it was true that Sirius Black had been the Potter's secret keeper, and I told them the truth, which was that it was true, because I had helped to arrange it myself. He folded his hands. My evidence is the reason that man is in Azkaban, not Peter's, mine. You didn't know, Harry said. No, I did not know, and I was also the most trusted man in Britain, and I said a true thing that produced an entirely false result. He looked at the biscuit tin. So, understand me clearly. I cannot fix this. I've already spent everything I have on Sirius Black once, and it went the wrong way. If I walk into the Ministry tomorrow with this animal in my hands, Cornelius will hear one great man covering for another. Then what do we do? Said Ron. You be children. Dumbledore said it with something close to relish. You are 13 years old. You have a photograph in a newspaper, a school map made by schoolboys, a rat with a missing toe, and a Weasley who keeps records. Nobody in the Ministry of Magic is frightened of any of that. And so, nobody in the Ministry of Magic will get in front of it in time. He kept Pettigrew. Professor Flitwick spent an hour that evening on a cage, and 2 more hours on the room the cage was in. Professor McGonagall sat outside the door until midnight, with her wand across her knees and her lips pressed thin. Third step, and this is my favourite thing in the entire timeline. The photograph came from Ron. It was the one from the summer, the prophet giving away a holiday, the whole family squashed in front of a pyramid with the sun in their eyes. 9 Weasleys and a rat on Ron's shoulder. Dated, printed, 60,000 copies. The dates came from Percy. Percy Weasley was head boy that year, and Percy Weasley had, in a trunk under his bed, every school planner he had ever owned, in order, with the corners squared off. Ron went up to the head boy's room on the Tuesday and asked his brother when he had got the rat. Why? Said Percy. Because I want to know. That is not a reason. That is a request. Percy sighed and got the trunk out anyway. He found it in about 90 seconds, in the back of the planner for 1982, in his own careful 9-year-old hand. Found a rat in the garden. Mum says I can keep him if he does not bite. Called him Scabbers. He came the summer after the war ended, Percy said. He was already grown. I remember thinking he was somebody's. Then Percy read the rest of it, because Ron had brought the map, and Ron was rubbish at explaining things, and had simply put it on the bed. Percy Weasley believed in that ministry the way other people believe in the sea. He went white, then he went very quiet. Then he said the most useful sentence anybody said all year. "This has to be a petition," Percy said. "Not a letter. A letter goes in a pile. A petition has to be entered in the register and answered in writing within 28 days. Once it is in the register, it cannot be lost unless somebody signs to say they lost it." He wrote it that night, in triplicate, in his own hand. He got the wording right. He made all three of them sign it, and then signed it forth himself, as the person who had witnessed the signatures. And then the last small human lever, which was Hermione's. Susan Bones sat 2 places along from Hermione in herbology, and had a round face and never said much. Her aunt sat on the Wizengamot. On the Thursday, Hermione asked Susan whether her aunt read her letters, and Susan said her aunt read everything, twice, and complained about it. So, a copy went to Madame Amelia Bones inside a letter from her niece, which is not a channel any government has ever known how to block. And here is the part I still think about, 6 years later in this timeline, and every time I look at it, nothing in that fortnight required a single piece of clever magic. A photograph, a planner, a petition in triplicate, a schoolgirl's letter to her aunt, 12 years of a man's life in a stone cell on an island, and the lock on the door turned out to be paperwork. The ministry acknowledged the petition on the 11th of April. Then it did absolutely nothing for 9 weeks. Bartemius Crouch Sr. signed the acknowledgement personally, which nobody thought anything of at the time, and which becomes extremely interesting later on. Cornelius Fudge came to the castle twice in May and did not ask to see the cage, because think about what was in that cage from the minister's point of view. Not a criminal. A hole in the floor of the last 12 years. If the rat was Peter Pettigrew, then the Ministry of Magic had put an innocent man in Azkaban without asking him a single question. It had left him there while he lost his mind. It had given the Order of Merlin first class to the man who actually did it. And it had pinned the medal on his mother. The hearing was set for the 19th of June, 1994, at 11 in the morning, in courtroom 10. 2 days before it, somebody in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement asked the Hogwarts staff, in writing, whether the animal could be transferred to a ministry holding cell in advance for security reasons. Professor McGonagall wrote back one line. No. The 19th of June, 1994. Courtroom 10 is underground and it has no windows, and the walls are dark stone. And in the middle of the floor, there is a chair with chains on the arms. The chains are not decoration. They move when somebody sits down. 50 members of the Wizengamot sat in plum-coloured robes on benches that went up in tiers. Cornelius Fudge sat in the front row with his hat on his knee. Madame Amelia Bones sat 2 seats along with a monocle and no expression at all. Bartemius Crouch Sr. sat at the end of the row with his hands folded in a suit so neat it looked ironed onto him. And in the raised chair in the middle, because the law said it had to be him, sat Albus Dumbledore, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, who was not allowed to help. That was the trap nobody had planned. The most persuasive man in Britain was in the room, and the chair he was sitting in meant he had to run the hearing fairly and say almost nothing. He had told them that in April. They had not really believed him until they saw him up there with his hands still. 3 13-year-olds sat on a wooden bench at the side with Professor McGonagall between them and the world. This is an inquiry under petition, Dumbledore said, into a single question of fact, not into any conviction, past or present. The question is whether Peter Pettigrew is alive. Madame Bones. It took 2 hours and 11 minutes. Ron went first, because Hermione had worked out that he should. That was her call, and it was the right one. Put the clever one first, and the room decides it is being handled. Put a freckled boy first, who keeps saying sorry for interrupting, and the room forgets to defend itself. He was in a cage that didn't shut, Ron said, so he could come out whenever he liked, and he did. And he'd sleep on my pillow. When I was 10, I had a bad year. I used to talk to him about it. Somebody on the third tier put a hand over their mouth. "How old is the animal, Mr. Weasley?" said Madam Bones. 12, ma'am. 12 and a bit. Percy got him the summer after the war. "And how long does a rat live?" "About 3 years. Ron cleared his throat. "I looked it up in the library in March. It's the only time I've ever been in the library on purpose. And I want that on the record because Hermione won't believe me otherwise." That got a laugh. A real one from about 11 people. And once a courtroom laughs at a boy, it has stopped believing he is lying. Then the photograph went up, and it was enormous because Madam Bones had it enlarged. 9 Weasleys in front of a pyramid, squinting with a rat on a boy's shoulder, printed in the Daily Prophet, 60,000 copies, dated the 12th of August 1993. Then Percy's planner, open at the summer of 1982, in a 9-year-old's careful hand. Found a rat in the garden. Then Professor McGonagall on the chain of custody, in 11 sentences with no adjectives in them. Then Hermione on the map. And this is where it could have gone wrong. A Wizengamot does not want to be told about school property by a child. A man on the 4th tier said so and used the word toy. Hermione did not argue with him. "You're right," she said. "It is a toy. It was made by 4 15-year-olds, and one of them drew a rude picture of a caretaker on the back. That's exactly why it matters." I fail to see how. Because nobody made it for a courtroom. She had her hands behind her back and she was going faster now. Nobody bribed it. Nobody enchanted it to say a useful thing. It was made to help 4 boys sneak out at night, and it does one job. It puts your name where your feet are. It has never been tested in a hearing, and it has never been wrong. 430 people in that castle could tell you it knows their names. The man on the 4th tier sat back. "And it says..." Hermione turned to face the benches. "It says Peter Pettigrew has been asleep on that boy's bed for 3 years. Then the chains on the chair in the middle of the room clinked, all on their own. There was nobody sitting in it. They sent for the animal at 12:20. Professor Flitwick brought the cage in himself and set it on the table and stood beside it, all 4 feet of him, looking mildly pleased. Then Madam Bones asked for the Ministry burial register for November of 1981, and the whole room understood at once, and the sound they made was not a nice sound. Because the Ministry had buried Peter Pettigrew, there had been a small ceremony, and there was a stone, and the register recorded in a clerk's copperplate exactly what had been interred, because the Ministry writes everything down, always, even the things it should be ashamed of. 1 finger, right hand, index, recovered from the scene, no further remains. "Professor Flitwick," said Madam Bones, "please restore the animal to its true form." It took him 2 tries because Pettigrew fought it. And then there was a small grey man on the floor of courtroom 10, in clothes that had been wrapped for 12 years. He blinked up at 50 members of the Wizengamot with his hands raised. He had 9 fingers. He talked for 11 minutes. And it was the worst thing Harry had ever heard. Worse than the graveyard later, in a way he could never explain to anybody. Peter Pettigrew wept. He called Sirius Black his oldest friend. He said he had been made to do it, and that he had been hiding out of terror. Then he turned around on the flagstones, looking for the kindest face in the room. He found Harry. Of course he found Harry. "You look like James," he said. "You look so like James." And James would have wanted... "Don't," Harry said. That was the only thing Harry Potter said in courtroom 10. 1 word, from a bench at the side, in a very level voice. It went into the Prophet the next morning, and it was quoted for years. The Wizengamot found, by a vote of 41-9, that Peter Pettigrew was alive. Then Amelia Bones stood up and asked the second question, the one that was not on the petition, and she asked it looking directly at Bartemius Crouch Sr. "On what date was Sirius Black interviewed?" Crouch did not move. "Madam Bones, in November of 1981, this department was processing 47 committals a week. That is not the question. On what date was he interviewed?" "There was no interview." "Was he charged?" "He was committed by order of the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement." Crouch's voice was perfectly steady. "That order was mine. It was signed on the 4th of November 1981, and it was lawful under the emergency powers then in force. Was it right? Crouch looked at her for a long moment. It was lawful, he said again. And that answer, given under oath in a stone room in the summer of 1994, ended a career, and it started something else that nobody in that courtroom could see coming. Hold on to Bartemius Crouch. He matters enormously in about 4 months, and not for the reason you would expect. The conviction of Sirius Black was quashed on the 21st of June, 1994, at 4:10 in the afternoon. 12 years, 10 months and 17 days after it was entered. He came in the next day, on his own, on foot, through the visitor's entrance, because Dumbledore had sent him a letter saying it was safe, and Sirius had decided to believe it. Harry met him in a corridor on level 2, outside a door with a brass plate on it. There were 2 auras 20 feet away, pretending to read a notice board. He was 34 years old, and he looked about 60. His hair was down past his shoulders, and his robes did not fit him, and he had a ministry blanket round his shoulders because somebody had thought he was cold. He looked at Harry for a long time and did not say any of the things he had planned. Then he turned to Ron. "You're the one who kept him," Sirius said. Ron went scarlet. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't know. That's not what I said." Sirius's voice had a crack all the way through it. "You kept him. For 3 years. You fed him, and you let him sleep on your bed, and you looked after him when he was ill, and you had no reason to, and you did it anyway. And then, when it turned out what he was, you didn't drop the box." He stopped and swallowed. "You brought him to a courtroom, in a biscuit tin. You could have thrown him in the lake and nobody would have known. I would still be on that island." "It seemed like the right thing to do," Ron said. "Also, Hermione said that if I threw him in the lake, she'd never speak to me again." Sirius Black laughed. It was a dreadful noise, like a door that has not been opened for years. Then it turned into something else. Harry stepped forward and got hold of him, and the 2 auras kept reading the notice board. So that is the first peek of this story, and it is a real one, and I do not want to take a single thing away from it. 3 children got an innocent man out of Azkaban with a photograph, a school planner, a petition in triplicate, and a rat with 9 toes. Nobody duelled. Nobody cast a spell in anger. The Ministry of Magic was defeated by its own filing system, which is the only thing that has ever defeated it. The bill came on Thursday. It came in the Daily Prophet, above the fold, under a photograph of 2 13-year-olds coming out of the visitor's entrance with their heads down. Rita Skeeter wrote it in 90 minutes, and it was the best thing she ever did. And it did more damage than anything else in this story. The headline called them the Potter and Granger case. The piece described them as inseparable and quoted an unnamed member of staff saying the 2 of them thought as one person. It printed the fact that they shared a notebook. It printed the word notebook in italics, which is a thing you can do to a word to make it sound like a crime. And in the 7th paragraph, once, it mentioned a Weasley boy who had owned the rat. Ron read it at breakfast on the last Thursday of term with all 4 of his brothers at the same table. 7th paragraph, said Fred. "It's fine," said Ron. "You're the one who caught him." "It's fine." He folded the paper up and put it under his plate, very carefully, which was not what he wanted to do with it. "It's better this way. Trust me." Nobody understood what he meant by that. Ron did not explain it. He had carried that shape in his head since a landing outside a boys' dormitory 3 years earlier. Now he had watched it come true in a national newspaper. And the truth is that a part of him was relieved. Because you cannot aim at a boy in the 7th paragraph. The 31st of October, 1994. Nobody put Harry Potter's name in the Goblet of Fire. I want to be honest with you about why, because it is the most important consequence in this entire story, and it happens quietly, in the background, while everyone is looking at a cup. In the timeline, you know, Peter Pettigrew spends that summer in Albania. He finds a bodiless Voldemort in a forest. He milks a snake, murders a ministry witch on a road, and carries his master to a house in Little Hangleton. He is the transport, he is the hands. Voldemort at that point cannot walk, cannot hold a wand, and cannot cross a border without somebody carrying him. In this timeline, Peter Pettigrew spent the summer of 1994 in a cell on level 10 of the Ministry of Magic, being fed twice a day through a hatch. So nobody went to Albania. Nobody found the thing in the forest. And on Halloween night, the Goblet of Fire produced exactly 3 names. The third one was Cedric Diggory. The Great Hall went absolutely mad. Harry clapped until his hands hurt. "Best night of my life," Ron said, with his mouth full. 3 champions. Not one of them's you. I'm not even slightly offended. You should be a bit offended. Ron pointed at the Hufflepuff table with a fork. Look at Diggory. He's got a jaw, you've got glasses. But the reason Harry Potter was in the Great Hall on the 31st of October and not in a room being told he was a champion was not luck. It was a filing cabinet. Because in July, Madame Amelia Bones opened a review of every emergency committal signed in Britain between 1979 and 1982. 341 cases. She did it because the Prophet had spent a fortnight asking, in enormous letters, how many others there were. And then she did the cleverest thing any adult does in this story. She gave 2 of the cases to the children, not out of kindness. Amelia Bones did nothing out of kindness. She needed the review to be believed, and she'd worked out that no member of the public would ever believe a ministry department investigating itself. But a review that had a 14-year-old boy in it, and the girl who had beaten them with a school map, was a review nobody could call a whitewash. So they got a room. It was on level 2, 11 feet by 9, with 1 high window and a table with a wobble. There was a brass plate on the door. Committal review, room 4. They went in every Saturday from 9 until 5, all through the autumn. Professor Lupin sat in the corner marking essays, because somebody had to be a responsible adult, and Sirius Black was legally not one yet. And I have to tell you, this is the happiest either of them ever was. 2 14-year-olds with a box of files, and no supervision to speak of. Hermione built a system in the first hour, in coloured ink, with a key. Harry read the ones nobody had opened because he had noticed that the boxes people had already opened had thumbprints on them, and the important ones did not. They found 4 people who should not have been in prison. One of them had died in 1986. 2 of them came out in the November. The 4th had been dead for so long that the only thing left to correct was a headstone, and a woman in Kent got a letter and a very small pension. Ron was not on the credentials. That was nobody's decision. Amelia Bones had been given 2 names by the Prophet, and she had used them. The paperwork went to Potter and Granger, because the newspaper had said Potter and Granger. Ron Weasley had been in the 7th paragraph. Government departments read newspapers exactly as carefully as everybody else does. So Ron came anyway. He came every Saturday. He sat on the floor outside room 4 in the corridor, because the room had 2 chairs. He brought sandwiches from the Burrow in greaseproof paper, and he did the crossword in the Prophet, badly, out loud. Sometimes he leaned in through the door and read over their shoulders, and sometimes Lupin swapped him the chair for 20 minutes and went for a walk. Nobody in this story ever told Ron Weasley he was not allowed in that room. That is the thing. It would have been easier if somebody had. On the 22nd of October, at about 4:30, Ron was sitting in the doorway with a box on his knees. Hermione had marked it low priority. It was full of visitor logs, and visitor logs are the dullest documents ever produced by any government. "Here," he said, "this is sad." Said Hermione, who was 3 inches from a page. "There's a bloke in here, went down in 82. Life. And his mum and dad came to see him once, right at the start, and that's the only visit in the whole log." Ron turned the page. "And then she died. His mum, 9 days later, says here she was too ill to travel, and they took her to the island in a boat with a healer." "That's very sad," Hermione said, and wrote something down. "Well, hang on." Ron frowned at it, because it says the healer signed her in and out. And then it says she was buried on the island. So she went in ill, and she came out on the log, and then she got buried in there anyway. Both. She's in the log twice, and she's in the ground. "Clerical error," said Harry, without looking up. "There's about 900 of them." "Yeah, only if my mum was dying, and she had 9 days left, and she got in a boat to go to Azkaban, that's not a clerical error. That's the last thing she ever did on purpose." Ron sat back against the door frame. "Nobody does that to say goodbye. You say goodbye at home, nothing happened. I want to be very precise here, because this is the hinge of the entire second half of this story, and it looks like nothing at all." Hermione said, "Put it in the book and I'll do it on Tuesday." Harry said, "Whose file is it?" Ron said, "Some bloke called Crouch." And Harry said, "Right, that'll be his son. We dim in September. He's the one who got life." Then he turned the page. The page he was on had a name he had been hunting since August, and Ron wrote it in the book. That was the first thing Ron Weasley ever wrote in that book. 6 pages from the back, in handwriting neither of them had ever seen in there, small and slanted and pressed hard into the paper. Visitor log, Azkaban, 82, Crouch. His mum is in it twice. Ask about the boat. Then it was Halloween, and there were 3 champions. And the Great Hall went mad, and nobody looked at the book for 11 days. On the 9th of November, a junior clerk in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement went through the same box for entirely unrelated reasons. He wrote a memo. It asked why a prisoner's mother appeared twice in a signing register. The memo went up. It reached Amelia Bones on the 11th. She read it twice and asked one question, which was whether anybody had physically laid eyes on the prisoner Bartemius Crouch Jr. in the last 12 years. Nobody had. 2 Aurors went to the Crouch house in Hertfordshire on the evening of the 12th of November. The room they found was on the 2nd floor. It had a bed in it, and the window was covered over. There were about 40 tally marks scratched into the plaster beside the door. There was a small tray with a cup on it, still warm, and there was a house elf sitting in the middle of the floor with her hands over her ears, rocking, saying the same 6 words over and over. The Aurors could not get anything out of her at all. She would not speak to Aurors. A master she loved had ordered her never to speak to anybody. The order held, even though the man who gave it was sitting in the next room having a nervous collapse. Ron got it out of her. He was there because Amelia Bones had sent for all 3 of them. She had read the 11-day-old memo, then she had read the note in the exercise book and gone the colour of old paper. Ron sat down on the floor next to a house elf, in a filthy tea towel, and did not ask her a single question about her master. He asked her what her name was. Winky, she said. That's a nice name. I'm Ron. Look, I'm not ministry. I've got no badge or anything. I'm just some bloke's brother. He rubbed his eyes. Is he your friend? The one who was in here? And Winky began to cry. She had been minding Bartemius Crouch Jr. for 12 years, under an order she could not break. Now she told a 14-year-old boy on the floor of an empty bedroom what she had done. She had let him out into the garden for air on the 4th of November because he had been so poorly. He had walked to the gate. He had taken a wand off the hedge where he had hidden it. He had looked back at her and said, "Thank you." He had been gone 8 days. Bartemius Crouch Jr. was 19 when he went into Azkaban, and he had been the most devoted servant Lord Voldemort ever had. Not the most useful, not the cleverest, the most devoted. He had gone into a courtroom in 1982 and told his own father, in front of the Wizengamot, that his master would return and would reward those who had stayed loyal. He was now 32 years old, entirely free, and holding a wand. No department of the British Ministry of Magic recorded him as living, and he had exactly one thing he wanted to do with the rest of his life. He was on a boat out of Dover on the 10th of November, and here is the bill for the 19th of June, and it is the biggest one in this story. So I want to say it slowly. They got an innocent man out of Azkaban, and the way they did it was to make the Ministry of Magic open its own filing cabinets and look inside. That was the right thing to do. It was also the only way anybody was ever going to find out that the Ron Crouch had been buried on that island. If those 3 children had never made that petition, Barty Crouch Jr. spends that whole year in a bed on the 2nd floor of his father's house with a house elf minding him, and Lord Voldemort waits in a forest in Albania for somebody who never comes. Instead, they let the daylight in, and the daylight found the door, and the door opened, and the thing behind it walked out and went looking for its master. Ron Weasley worked all of that out on the 12th of November, sitting on a floor next to a crying house elf, about 4 seconds after Winky said the word garden. He did not say it out loud. He never said it out loud to either of them, once in 4 years. The 24th of June, 1995, Cedric Diggory won the Triwizard Tournament. He came out of that maze at 11 minutes past 9, with the cup in both hands and a cut over one eye. The Hufflepuff table stood on the benches. His father cried in the middle of about 400 people and did not care in the slightest. Cedric Diggory went home that summer. He was 17 years old. He got his apparition license in the August, and he was a decent, dull, kind young man who liked being liked. And he lived. If you want to know what all that paperwork actually bought, that is what it bought. A boy went home to Amos Diggory. Whatever else this timeline costs, and it costs a great deal, put that on the other side of the page and leave it there. Ron Weasley found out that the war had restarted at 11:20 that night, in a corridor on the ground floor, from the last person in the castle he would have picked. He was on his own because he had gone back for Ginny's cloak. The feast was still going. He came round the corner by the tapestry of the dancing trolls, and Professor Snape was standing there with one hand against the wall. Snape was the colour of a fish. "Sir? Weasley?" Snape did not straighten up. "You are alone." Ginny left her cloak. "Where are Potter and Granger?" "Great Hall." "She's arguing with Crumb about something, and Harry's eating a trifle." Snape closed his eyes for about a second and a half. Then he pushed his left sleeve up his forearm. Ron had never seen the dark mark. Nobody his age had. He had heard about it the way you hear about a war your parents were in, as a thing that was over. It was black, and it was raised off the skin, and it was moving. "Do you understand what you are looking at?" "Yes," Ron said. His voice had gone somewhere strange. "Yes, I know what that is." "Say it." "It's back. He's back." Ron's hand had found the wall. "That's sir. That means he has a body." Snape pulled his sleeve down and buttoned the cuff. His hands were perfectly steady, and Ron never forgot that either. He was restored tonight, not more than an hour ago. Karkaroff has already run. I have approximately 11 minutes before I have to decide whether I'm going to answer. Answer what? It is a summons, Weasley. It is not a rumour. Ron stood in a corridor looking at a man who was about to walk out of a castle and into a graveyard on purpose. He could not think of one useful thing to say. "Are you going? That is not your business, and you will not ask it again." Snape's voice sharpened, and then, oddly, gentled. "Listen to me. You are going to go into that hall, and you're going to get the headmaster, and then you're going to tell Potter. Why don't you tell him? Because he will hear it from me and spend 4 minutes deciding whether I am lying." Snape said that without any self-pity whatsoever, as a technical fact. And because I have thought about this for 2 years, and there is a second reason, I am going to tell you what it is. You are the only person left in this school who has not stopped being able to hear things. Sir, anything you say to those two is said to both of them. There is no version of this where I tell Potter something, and Granger does not have it by Tuesday. In ink, in that book. Snape looked down the corridor. That is not a criticism of either of them. It is a fact about them, the way weather is a fact. It means there are things I can never say inside that castle. I need somebody who can carry one sentence and stop. You want me to lie to them. I want you to tell them the truth and leave me out of it. Say you saw Karkaroff running. It is even true. Snape pushed off the wall. Can you do that? And Ron Weasley, 15 years old, who had spent 4 years being the one who noticed, said yes. He has never told anybody about that conversation. Not Harry, not Hermione, not his mother. There is exactly one person alive at the end of this story who knows it happened, and it is not Ron. Here is what actually happened that night, and they did not learn all of it for 8 months. Bartemius Crouch Jr. had spent 7 months in the mountains of northern Albania. He found what he was looking for in April, in a hut, in a shape you would not want described to you, and he was a competent man. That is the whole difference. Peter Pettigrew was a frightened little coward who did what he was told and got things wrong. Barty Crouch Jr. had been the youngest Death Eater in the First War, and he was very good at his job. He needed 3 things for the ritual, and he got 2 of them easily. Bone of the Father was in a churchyard in Little Hangleton, where it had been since 1943, under a headstone nobody visited. Flesh of the Servant he gave himself on the 18th of June, with a knife, without hesitating, which is a thing Pettigrew took several minutes and a great deal of screaming to do. The 3rd thing was blood of the enemy. He wanted Harry Potter. His master wanted Harry Potter, with a hunger that was frightening even to a fanatic. There was old magic in that boy's blood. Voldemort had spent 13 years working out exactly how to steal it. He could not get near him. That was not cleverness on anybody's part. It was luck. And it was the shape of the year Harry Potter spent that whole year inside Hogwarts Castle, or inside a ministry building with 2 auras on the door, or in a house in Islington, under a Fidelius charm. His godfather was a free man with a house, a paranoid streak, and a legal right to have him. There was no tournament with his name in it. There was no portkey at the end of a maze. There was no single hour in that entire year when Harry Potter was somewhere unwatched. So Crouch took the blood he could reach. He took it off Sirius Black, in an alley behind a bookshop in Charing Cross Road, on the evening of the 22nd, in about 90 seconds. Sirius fought him. Sirius nearly won. And later on, he would tell people that with a completely straight face, and everybody would let him. But Barty Crouch Jr. had not survived 12 years in a bed on the 2nd floor of his father's house by fighting fair. He put Sirius through a wall, opened his arm from wrist to elbow, filled a small glass bottle, and left him alive. Left him alive on purpose. That is the part that mattered. Your master will want to know who it came from, Crouch said, crouching over him. So do not die. He would find it useful, and I would find it funny. Sirius Black was in St Mungo's for 9 days. He did not tell Harry what had been taken until the end of August, and when he did, he told him in a kitchen, sitting down, with both hands flat on the table. He's got my blood in him, Sirius said. The thing that stood up in that graveyard stood up on my blood. So whatever he is now, some of it's me. Harry had spent 4 years learning from a girl how to say the true thing immediately. That's not how it works, he said. You don't know how it works. No. But I know it isn't a curse, it's a recipe. And you didn't hand it over. He took it out of your arm. Harry pushed the teapot across the table. And I know one other thing. He wanted mine. Yes. He's wanted mine since I was 1 year old, and he's had 13 years to plan it, and he did not get it. Harry sat back. He had to make do. I'd think about that if I were him. I'd think about it a lot. Lord Voldemort returned to a body that night, in a churchyard in Little Hangleton, with 2 people present. He was strong. He was patient. He had a servant worth 10 of the one he lost. And there was one thing wrong with him that nobody on either side understood for 11 months. And it was this. He never came for Harry Potter. Not that night, not that summer, not once in the whole of that year. He sent people, and he watched, and he built, and he never came himself, and he did not touch him. Everybody assumed it was strategy. It was not strategy. The 12th of October 1995. The Ministry of Magic did not deny that Lord Voldemort had returned. It could not. There was a Death Eater in a cell on level 10 who had been there for 18 months. On the night of the 3rd task, 2 guards had watched his arm burn. There was a Durmstrang headmaster who had abandoned a ship and vanished. There was a man in St Mungo's with 40 stitches in his arm and a story about a glass bottle. So Cornelius Fudge did the other thing, which was worse. He agreed that something had happened, called it a resurgence rather than a war, and then he found somebody to blame who was not himself. 2 children had gone into the ministry's own filing cabinets. 2 children had been given credentials and a room with a brass plate on the door, and 11 days after one of them read a visitor log out loud, Bartimaeus Crouch Jr. had walked out of a house in Hertfordshire and gone to find his master. That story was in the Prophet on the 2nd of September 1995, and here is the thing about it. It was true, not the shape they put on it, not the sneering bit about publicity seekers, and not the paragraph implying they had done it for attention. But the spine of it was true. Harry Potter knew it was true, and so did Hermione Granger, and they had both known since the previous November. Neither of them had ever quite managed to say it to the other one, which is interesting, because they said everything to each other. Dolores Umbridge arrived at Hogwarts on the 1st of September, with a mandate, a pink cardigan, and a very specific job. She was not there to deny the war. She was there to make sure no student ever put a hand into a ministry drawer again. The decrees came out one at a time. The 6th one banned student groups of more than 3. The 8th withdrew all student credentials, permits, and access passes issued by any department, which took 11 words to cancel a review that had freed 4 people. The 11th was the one nobody outside the castle noticed, and it said that unauthorised written records held by students concerning ministry business were subject to inspection. She came for the book on the 12th of October, at 4:20 in the afternoon, and she did it correctly, with a signed form. Her office was pink. There were kittens on plates, and a lace cloth, and a plate of shortbread biscuits. The tea was already poured when they came in. 2 cups. And that told Hermione something before either of them sat down. The book was on the desk. Not one book, all of it. 11 exercise books in a stack, going back to a paper cover with a price still on it. "Do sit down," said Umbridge. They sat down. "I have been reading these," she said. "All weekend, in fact. I do hope you don't mind." "They're private," Harry said. "They concern the committal review, dear, which makes them departmental." She smiled. She had a very small mouth, and they are not what I expected. I want you to know that. I expected plotting. There is a great deal of arithmetic in here, and a list of everybody who has ever been unkind to Neville Longbottom, and 4 pages about a cat. Hermione said nothing at all. Her hands were flat on her knees. "Here is my favourite." Umbridge opened the very first one, the one from 1991 at the first page, and she read it out in her light, high, pleasant voice. "People stop talking to me. That's the whole shape of my life so far. They don't shout, they just go quiet, and the quiet gets bigger, and then one day it's permanent, and nobody ever said a single word about it." The clock ticked. Somewhere below, a bell went for the end of afternoon lessons. "Did you write that, Miss Granger? Or did he?" "I said it," Hermione said. "He wrote it down. How very touching." Umbridge closed the book. "Now, I have a form here, and it is quite short. It states that the committal review was conducted without proper adult supervision, and that certain conclusions in it were reached in error by persons not qualified to reach them. It does not blame either of you. It simply corrects the record." "It says we got it wrong," said Harry. "It says the review got it wrong." "Same thing. There's 4 people out of Azkaban because of it, and 1 man out of a bedroom in Hertfordshire." Umbridge said it very gently. She said everything gently, and it went in like a needle. "Would you like a biscuit?" Nobody took a biscuit. Then she did the clever thing, and I want to be fair to her here. It is the cleverest thing anybody does to these 2 in 7 years, and she worked it out in an afternoon of reading. She turned the form round and pushed it towards Hermione, and she put a quill beside it, and she did not put a second quill on the table. "Only 1 signature is required," she said. "The Ministry has no interest in punishing children. If you sign it, Miss Granger, the matter closes, the review is amended, and you sit your examinations in June. Mr. Potter need never sign anything at all." And there it was. Not shouting, not detentions, not a quill that writes in blood, though that came later, and it came for both of them. Dolores Umbridge had read 11 notebooks over 1 weekend. She had worked out the single thing that could break the arrangement described in them, make one of them do something the other one did not have to do. Hermione looked at the form for 4 seconds. Then she picked up the quill, and Harry did not say a word, and she wrote 3 words on the bottom of the paper and turned it back round. "Send me 2. "I beg your pardon?" "Send me 2 forms," Hermione said. "Identical, 1 each. If we are going to say the review was improperly conducted, then we are both going to say it in our own words, with our own names. It will go in the register, and it will be answered in writing within 28 days. She stood up. "That's a petition, Professor. I know how those work. My friend's brother taught me." They walked out of that office with nothing signed and no biscuits eaten, and the 11 exercise books stayed on the desk. They never got them back that year. The books went into a drawer in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, in a brown folder with a reference number on it. 2 years later, when the Ministry fell, that folder was still there, and that is the second time somebody in this story turns 2 children's private handwriting into a Ministry file. The first time it saved a man's life. This time it sat in a drawer, in the dark, waiting for the wrong people to read it, and in about 20 months, the wrong people did. Ron Weasley was not in that office. He was not on the credentials, so he was not on the form, so he was not on the list of students to be summoned. He sat on the stairs outside for 40 minutes, and then walked back to the tower with them and listened to the whole thing twice. And then he asked one question. "What was in it about people?" Harry said. "What?" "The books." She said, "There's a list of everyone who's ever been rotten to Neville." "What else is in there about people?" "Not about spells and dates. About people. Loads, said Hermione slowly. Everything. Who's frightened of who? Who lies to teachers? Which prefects can be talked round? She stopped. Ron, why? Because she's read it, Ron said. She's read all of it, and she's not going to forget it. And neither is anybody she shows it to. And none of that is spells, is it? That's just who we all are, he shrugged. I'd want to know what a stranger knows about my mum. That's all. Nobody wrote that conversation down anywhere, because there was nothing left to write it in. Ron Weasley bought a notebook in Hogsmeade on the following Saturday for 4 sickles. He did not tell either of them. It was not a secret, so much as a thing there was no good moment to mention, which is how most secrets actually start. He wrote down people, only people, who was frightened, who was lying, who had gone quiet, and the group that met in a room on the 7th floor that year, the one with the coins and the list of names on the wall, was Ron's idea, and not Harry's. He said it in the common room one afternoon in October with his mouth full of toast. You two keep saying somebody ought to teach us to fight. Yes, said Hermione. Well, he can teach, you can organise, and I'll get people to come, because you two are terrifying and I'm not. 28 people came to the first meeting in the Hog's Head. Neville Longbottom put his name at the top of the list before anybody else did, and said nothing about it. Hermione asked him why he had been so quick. He started the sentence twice, and then finished the second one. Because my gran told me what a review is. The 18th of June, 1996. The trap was built out of newspaper cuttings. I want to be extremely clear about that, because it is the whole cost of this story arriving all at once, and it did not arrive as a curse. Lord Voldemort needed Harry Potter to walk into the Department of Mysteries of his own accord, and he could not use Sirius Black, because Sirius Black had spent a year being publicly, loudly, tediously safe. So he used the other thing everybody knew. Lucius Malfoy had been a school governor and a friend of the minister for 11 years, and there was a brown folder in a drawer on level 2 with a reference number on it. He read it in March. What he brought out of it was not a plan. It was one line, which he passed on, and which his master turned over for 2 months like a man examining a coin. The Potter boy tells the Granger girl everything, and she would go anywhere for him, and he knows it. The vision came at 2:20 in the morning on the 18th of June. Harry saw a long room with shelves in it, and a girl on the floor between two of them with her arm bent the wrong way. He heard his own name said in her voice. He woke up with his hand over his mouth, and then he did the thing he had done every single time for 5 years. He went and told her. He got 3 steps up the girl's staircase, which shrieks and turns into a slide. He was shouting her name, and the whole tower was waking up. Hermione came down in her dressing gown, with her wand already lit. She listened to all of it, twice. "It's a trap," she said. "I know it's a trap." "You don't, though." She was already moving. "You know it in your head. Your feet don't know it. So, we check." That is the correct move. It is the same move she made in 1993 with the mirror, and it is the reason she was alive to make it. Do not walk round the corner. Look at it sideways first. They tried for 2 hours. Umbridge was gone by then, carried into the forest in April, and returned in May with a permanent flinch. But her decrees were still up, and the flu network in the castle was still monitored. Hedwig was in the owlery and would take 9 hours. The mirror Sirius had given Harry at Christmas, the two-way one, was in the bottom of his trunk in a pair of socks. It was broken. Harry had never once thought to check it. Hermione was in the common room at 4:30 in the morning with a candle and no options left. And here is where she broke it. Not badly, not selfishly. In the smallest and most reasonable way a person can break a thing, and it cost more than any of the big betrayals in this story. She worked out that if she went and came back, he would not go. She wrote him a note. She left it on the table where he would find it at 6, propped against the candlestick, in that small upright hand he had been reading for 5 years. "I have gone to look. If I am back by 7, it is a lie, and you have lost nothing but a night. If I am not back by 7, then it is not a lie. You will need Ron and Neville and Luna and Ginny. You will need brooms, and you will need to have eaten something. Do not come alone. I love you. Do not come alone." She was through the fireplace, in Aberforth Dumbledore's back room by 5, and inside the ministry by 20 past, and she got as far as the 9th level. She did not come back by 7. They went at 8 in the morning on Thestrals, 5 of them, because Harry read the note and did exactly what it said. I am not going to walk you through the whole of the Department of Mysteries, because you know that building better than I do. The room of doors that spins, the tank with the brains, the clocks, the archway on the dais with the curtain that moves when there is no wind. I am going to tell you about 90 seconds in the Hall of Prophecy, because those 90 seconds are what this entire video has been walking towards. They found her in row 97. She was sitting up against the shelves with her hands tied and one eye closed over. She had been there 3 hours with 12 Death Eaters in the room. Lucius Malfoy had been talking at her for most of it, because Lucius Malfoy could never resist an audience. Harry came down the row with his wand up and Ron on his left. "Take the orb off the shelf, Potter," Lucius said. "You can, she can't." That is rather the point of the evening. Hermione Granger had spent 3 hours on a stone floor doing the only thing still available to her, which was reading. Now she said one sentence. "Harry, there's a name on the label, and it isn't only yours." Everything stopped for about a second. "Shut her up," said Lucius. "There are 2 names on it," Hermione said, faster, louder. "It says the Dark Lord and Harry Potter, and underneath it says S-P-T to A, P, W, B, D. That means somebody told somebody. The somebody who was told is Albus Dumbledore, and he has known every word of it since before you were born. So has your master. Neither of them ever told you what it says. Ask yourself, which of those 2 is more frightened of you knowing? 12 Death Eaters. A 15-year-old girl with a closed eye, tied at the wrists, running her mouth as fast as she could go. She had worked out one thing in 3 hours on that floor. Make sure Harry leaves this room, carrying information instead of a glass ball. Ron got to her first. He went straight past 2 shelves and a man in a mask and took a knee in the ribs for it. Then he cut her hands free with a spell Ginny had taught him on the 7th floor. She came up off the ground swinging. Then the shelves came down. You know the rest of the shape of it. 6 children and 100,000 prophecies, going off like a hailstorm. Then a long room with a dais in it. Then the Order, coming through the door 11 minutes too late. Sirius Black died at 4 minutes to 10 in the morning on the 18th of June, 1996. He was laughing when it happened, which everyone who was there mentions, and nobody can explain. Bellatrix Lestrange sent something red past Harry's shoulder, and Hermione was behind Harry, and Sirius was already moving before the curse left the wand. He put his arm out and shoved her sideways into Ron, and both of them went down on the steps, and he took the second curse in the chest going backwards. It was 1 step. He was 1 step from the edge. The curtain moved as if somebody had opened a door in a warm room, and then it hung still, and there was nothing behind it at all. Harry Potter was 15 years old, and he had known that man for 2 years and 2 months. That is longer than he had known his own parents. It is not nearly long enough, and I am not going to dress it up. Sirius Black got 2 years, 2 summers, 1 Christmas, a house with a kitchen in it, a motorbike he was not allowed to ride, and a boy who came and stayed in his spare room and left toast crumbs everywhere. 12 years on an island bought him 2 years in a kitchen, and then he spent one of his steps on a 15-year-old girl he had known since she was 13. He would tell you that was a bargain. He would say it with his whole face and mean it. That does not make it one. They sat in the headmaster's office at 3 in the afternoon, all 3 of them, because Dumbledore had asked for all 3 of them. He looked at Harry for a long time, then he answered a question nobody had asked, which was always how you knew he was about to say something that mattered. "You have been wondering why he has never come for you himself." Harry did not answer. "Blood of the enemy," Dumbledore said. "Forcibly taken. That is the line in the recipe, and it does not specify which enemy, and Barty Crouch could not reach you, so he took what he could reach. Which means the body Lord Voldemort is walking around in was built on Sirius Black." He set his hands on the desk. "Your mother's protection is still in you, Harry. Entire and untouched. Exactly as it was when you were 1 year old. He cannot lay a hand on you. He tried it in that churchyard, on a captured Auror who resembled you closely enough to be worth an experiment, and learned nothing. He tried it again this morning, in a corridor in this building. He screamed, and he left. Nobody spoke for a while. 'He can't touch me,' Harry said. 'He cannot touch you, so he'll touch everyone else.' 'Yes.' Ron Weasley had a bandage round his forearm, and had not said one word since they came up the stairs. Now he said the sentence that runs the rest of this story. Then he's not fighting Harry anymore, is he? He's going to spend the whole war coming at the two of you sideways. Everyone he sends from now on is coming for whoever you two love. He looked up, and there's a list of who that is, in a drawer, on level 2. Dumbledore closed his eyes. Yes, he said, I am afraid there is. Then he told Harry the prophecy. All of it, at last, 4 years after he had decided to wait. And he did not ask him to keep it to himself. And he did not look at Hermione when he said it. And afterwards, on the stairs, Harry asked him why not. Because I've been wrong about that for 5 years, Dumbledore said. And I have run out of time to be wrong about it slowly. The 19th of December, 1997, Albus Dumbledore died on a tower in June, and the Ministry of Magic fell in August, and by December, there were 3 people living in a tent. I'm going to leave the rest of that year alone, you know it. What matters for this story is what was in the tent, and there were 4 things. A locket that nobody could open, a sword that nobody could find, a wireless that only worked if you held the aerial, and a wood on the Welsh border in the middle of December, with rain coming through the trees for 9 days straight. They took the locket in turns, an hour at a time, because it was worse if you slept in it. It did something different to each of them. To Harry, it was a voice about people he had got killed, and there was a list, and it was accurate. To Hermione, it was a voice that pointed out, very reasonably, in her own accent, that she was the only one in the tent whose parents were alive, that she had made them forget her, that this was not a thing a person comes back from. To Ron, it said one thing, over and over, and it never had to change it. 7th paragraph. That is what a Horcrux does. It does not invent a fear. It finds the true one and turns the volume up, and it had 6 years of material to work with, and it did not need to lie once. On the 18th, Ron cooked. That is worth a sentence, because it was the best evening any of the 3 of them had that winter. He had caught 2 fish out of a stream with a spell Ginny had shown him, and he cremated both of them. Hermione ate hers anyway and said it was fine. Harry said it tasted like a shed. Ron said that was the technique. Then he taught Hermione chess properly for the 4th time. You keep doing this thing, he said. You look at the whole board and you find the best move. That is chess. That is the entire game. That's the entire game if you're playing yourself. Ron moved a pawn, 1 square. You're not. You're playing me. So the question isn't the best move. It's the best move I haven't got a face about yet. That is the most Ron Weasley sentence anyone has ever said Harry, from the other side of the tent. Thanks very much. It was a compliment. Then say it in a compliment voice next time. They laughed. Harry laughed until he had to put his tea down. And I want that on the record before the next part. In about 18 hours, all 3 of them were going to say things they could not take back. It would be very easy to tell you this story as though they had stopped enjoying each other by then. They had not. That is what makes it hard. The argument started at about 10 in the morning on the 19th of December over a map, and it lasted 4 hours. Godric's Hollow, Harry said. No, said Ron. Ron, hear it first. I've heard it. You've been circling it for a fortnight and I've watched you do it. Ron put his mug down. Go on then, say the case. So, Harry said the case and it was a good one. The sword was gone. The locket would not open. They had nothing, no next name, no next place. And they had been in that wood for 9 days going quietly mad. And one person was left alive who had known his parents, and known Dumbledore, and known Godric's Hollow before any of it happened. She was very old. She lived at the end of the lane, and her name was Bathilda Bagshot. And Dumbledore left me a book with her name in the footnotes about 400 times, Harry said. She knew all of them. She's the last one. She's the last one, Hermione said. And she's 90 odd. And Rita Skeeter got a whole biography out of her last year. Somebody sat in her front room for 6 months. And she talked, so she still talks. Right, said Ron. And now do mine. He had it in order. He had been putting it in order for a fortnight, in a notebook they did not know about, and he laid it out one piece at a time. 1. It's the one place on earth where he knows you'd go, not might. Would. It's got your mum and dad in the ground in it, and he put them there. He can't touch me. He can't touch you. He can touch a house. Ron held up 2 fingers. 2. Skeeter's book came out in July, and she's not been seen since. Bagshot. Nobody's seen her. There's a bloke on the wireless last week did a whole thing about how she never answered his letters. Everyone assumed she'd died. only there's no notice, and there's always a notice. My mum reads them out at breakfast. That's not evidence, said Hermione. No, it's a shape. Ron did not raise his voice. That is the thing about this argument, that everybody gets wrong. 3. It's Christmas Eve. That's when you want to go. I can see it on you, and I understand why. And you're right that the village will be full, and full is good cover. Only think about who's out on Christmas Eve. Nobody. Families are indoors. So the churchyard's empty and the lane's empty. And anybody who is out there on that night is out there for one reason. Nobody said anything. And 4. Ron sat back. 4's the only one that actually matters. Every single thing we've walked into for 6 years, we walked into because it was the obvious next step. And we'd run out of other ideas. The corridor with the sinks. The Department of Mysteries. We're doing it again. We're doing it right now. In a tent. Because we're bored. And wet. And we've got nothing else. Hermione was quiet for a long moment. And she took it seriously. I want that credited to her. A lesser version of this scene has her being dismissive. You might be right, she said. You're right about the shape. But we have nothing, Ron. We have a locket we can't open and a country that's fallen. And every week we sit still. Is a week. They get further ahead. There is a difference between a risk and a mistake. And I don't know how to tell which this is without going. That's what a mistake is, Ron said. That's what one is. They went round it 3 more times, and at about 2 in the afternoon, it turned into the other thing, the way arguments do. You've already decided, Ron said. We have not decided. Hermione, you looked at him 20 minutes ago. He said the bit about the footnotes, and you looked at him, and he looked back, and neither of you said a word, and it was over. I watched it happen. Ron's voice had gone flat, which was much worse than shouting. I'm not saying you didn't listen. You did. You both listened to every word, and then you went to each other. That's not fair, Harry said. No, it's just true. Those aren't the same. Ron stood up. You made a promise when you were 11, and you've kept it for 6 years, and it's the best thing either of you has ever done. I mean that. There's a man walked out of Azkaban because you two never shut up at each other. Then what? Then this. Ron looked at both of them. A promise that 2 people keep perfectly is a wall. It doesn't matter that the door's open if there's only ever 2 people inside. I've been standing in the doorway since I was 11, and I'm not complaining about it. I chose it. But you can't be corrected by somebody you've already agreed past, and there's nobody left in this tent who's allowed to be the one who's wrong. You are allowed. I'm outvoted, Ron said. That's not the same as allowed either. They went to bed on it. The decision when it came was not dramatic. Harry said they would go on Christmas Eve, and Hermione said all right, and Ron said fine. Ron never said fine. Neither of them noticed. At about 3 o'clock on the morning of the 20th, Ron Weasley sat up in the dark and put his boots on. He went outside and sat on a wet log with a wand light and his own notebook. He had bought it in Hogsmeade for 4 sickles 2 years earlier, and he had filled most of it. It was all people. Who was frightened? Who was lying? Who had gone quiet? 6 years of a boy watching the 2 cleverest people he knew and writing down the only thing they never wrote down, which was each other. And on about the 9th page from the back, in the middle of a list, there were 4 lines of practice, because Ron Weasley had been reading Hermione Granger's handwriting since he was 11 years old. He had read 11 exercise books of it, cover to cover, sitting on floors and stairs and in doorways, more carefully and more often than anybody else alive. He knew that she crossed her 7s. He knew she never joined the letter G to anything. He knew that when she was in a hurry, the tops of her capitals came off. He was not a clever boy in the way the other 2 were clever. He had one skill, and he had spent 6 years on it, and it was noticing. It took him about 40 minutes to get it right. He wrote 2 notes that night in 2 different hands, and neither of them was his own. Then he put them where they would be found on the wrong day. He sat outside on the log until it got light. He was sick twice, quietly, behind a tree, because at around 4 o'clock he had worked out exactly what he was going to have to do on Christmas Eve. Somebody had to walk up that lane and open that door. And it could not be either of them, because if it was either of them, the other one would be standing right next to them when it happened. That was the whole point of the 2 of them. That was the thing they had built when they were 11 and had never once broken. So it had to be the one who was standing in the doorway. Nobody ever thanks the piece. the 24th of December, 1997. Harry found his note at 9 in the evening, folded twice, tucked under the strap of his rucksack, gone ahead to look at the house. Meet me at the churchyard gate at midnight. Do not go up the lane on your own. He read it 4 times. The 7s were crossed. The letter G stood on its own the way it always did. The tops of the capitals had come off, the way they always did when she was in a hurry. Hermione found hers at 3 minutes past 9, in the pocket of the coat she'd left over the back of the chair. Harry's writing, which had always looked like something a bird had done. Gone ahead. Meet me at the churchyard gate at midnight. Stay out of the lane. Neither of them waited for midnight, obviously. They were both in that village by 20 past 11, coming at the church from opposite ends, each of them furious with a person who was not there. They met at the gate. There is no shouting in this part. I have thought about how to tell it, and there is no shouting. 2 people stood in the snow at the gate of a churchyard on Christmas Eve. Each of them held out a piece of paper. Each of them read the other one, and it took about 4 seconds. Hermione made a small sound. "That's my hand," she said. "Harry, that is my hand. The G is right." He got the G right. "Where is he?" She looked up the lane. There was one house at the far end with the hedge grown over the gate, and there was no light in any window, and there were fresh footprints going in and none coming out. 6 years, Hermione said. Her voice had gone somewhere Harry had never heard it go. He's been reading it for 6 years. Then they ran. Ron Weasley had gone through that gate at 25 past 9. He did it the way you do a thing you decided on in the dark, quickly, and without looking at it. He had 2 things with him. The first was his own notebook in his inside pocket, because he had not wanted it left in a tent for somebody else to read. The second was a small round mirror. He had bought it in a junk shop in Ottery St Mary when he was 15, for 11 nuts. He had carried it in his coat ever since. He had never once told anybody why, because he'd seen it work. Years earlier, a 13-year-old girl had walked down a corridor, holding a mirror out at arm's length, checking every corner before she turned it. It had saved her life. Everybody in the castle knew Hermione Granger had been petrified that night. Ron Weasley was the only person who had knelt on the flagstones and looked at how she was holding her arm. He held the mirror out at the bottom of the stairs. The old woman was standing on the landing above him in the dark. She had not made a sound coming to the top of the stairs, and she did not make one now, and in the little circle of glass, Ron could see her from underneath. Her feet were not on the floor. That is all. That is the entire margin. A boy with a junk shop mirror saw a pair of slippers hanging half an inch clear of the carpet. He did not go up the stairs. He did not shout a warning. He did not try to fight it. He turned round and went out of that house at a dead run, shouting his own name. That is not a mistake in the telling. He went down the lane, roaring his own name at the top of his voice, away from the church, away from the gate where 2 people were standing. And the thing came out of the doorway behind him, with the dead woman coming apart round it. Nagini caught him about 40 feet short of the last house in the village. She took him across the left forearm, over the place the bandage had been 18 months earlier, and put him through a garden wall. He came down in a flower bed under 3 feet of collapsed brick, with 2 ribs gone, and his wand somewhere in the snow. Harry and Hermione came up that lane about 11 seconds later, and this is the only time in this entire story that Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort are in the same street. It lasts under a minute, almost nothing happens, and it is the most important minute in the war, because Voldemort came, Nagini called him and he came, out of the air at the top of the lane. He saw the boy in the snow, and then he did the thing he had been unable to stop himself imagining for 16 years. He walked to him and put out a hand. You know what happens. It had happened in a churchyard in Little Hangleton, with a captured aura as a rehearsal. It had happened again in a corridor on level 9. Every single time the answer was the same. A woman had stood over a cot in that exact village on the 31st of October, 1981, and refused to move. There was a sound like a kettle taken off a fire. Lord Voldemort went backwards into the hedge with his hand held against his chest, and he screamed. And it was not a frightening noise. That is what Harry remembered. It was the noise of somebody who has burnt themselves on something they were told not to touch. Hermione did not watch any of it. She was on her knees in a flower bed with her hands under a brick wall. She got hold of Ron Weasley's collar with one hand and Harry Potter's sleeve with the other. Then she turned on the spot, and all of them went. And here is the last consequence, and it is a small one, and it matters enormously. Harry Potter's wand was in his hand when they left that lane. Holly, 11 inches, with a phoenix feather in it. Nobody had to blast a ceiling down. Nobody was dragging an unconscious body up a staircase with a snake coming through the banisters. Hermione Granger had both hands free because Ron Weasley had taken the house on his own. That wand was still whole on the 2nd of May. They came down in a field somewhere in Herefordshire with about 4 inches of snow on it. It took Hermione 40 minutes to stop the bleeding. She cried the entire time and swore, and Harry had never heard her swear before in his life. Ron was awake for most of it, which was worse. "Don't," he said at one point. "Don't do the big thing. I am going to do the big thing." Hermione's hands were shaking and steady at once. They teach that at St. Mungo's, and she had learned it out of a book. "I'm going to do an enormous thing about this, and you're going to lie there and take it." "Fair enough. You forged my handwriting." "Yeah? How long have you been able to do that?" Ron thought about it. He was very grey. "Since about 4th year," he said. "Not on purpose. I just knew what it looked like." Harry sat down in the snow next to him and did not say anything for a while, because there was nothing he could safely say. Then he said, "You could have told us." "I did tell you," Ron coughed, and it hurt him. "I told you for 4 hours. That's not the same as being able to stop you. Nothing was going to stop you. There's 2 of you and 1 of me, and you'd already looked at each other." He shut his eyes. "So I stopped trying to stop you, and I went and did the other thing instead. You lost a piece on purpose. I lost a piece on purpose." Hermione put her forehead down on his shoulder for about 3 seconds. It was the largest physical gesture she made in the entire war. Then she went back to his arm. They fixed it that night. Not the arm, the other thing. Harry got Ron's notebook out of his inside pocket because Ron asked him to. It fell open on the pages of practice. 4 lines of somebody else's writing, done over and over by a boy on a wet log in the dark. Neither of them ever forgot the sight of it. And then Hermione turned to the very first page and found it blank because Ron had never got round to writing anything at the front. She put 3 names on it. "Say it properly," she said, "so all 3 of us know what we agreed." So Harry said it, sitting in the snow in a field in Herefordshire at about 2 in the morning on Christmas Day, 1997. "We don't stop talking. Not ever. Whatever happens, however many of us are in the room, we don't go quiet on each other." He stopped. "And that's the old one. Here's the new bit. If one of us says no, the other 2 don't get to go anyway." "That's a terrible rule," said Ron. "That's going to be a nightmare." "Say it. If one of us says no, the other 2 don't get to go anyway." Ron opened one eye. "Hermione, your handwriting's better than mine, and you've put me in the middle." "You are in the middle," Hermione said. "That is the point. You have always been in the middle. We were the ones who kept standing at the 2 ends. Ron Weasley destroyed that locket in February, in a frozen pool in the Forest of Dean. Both of them were standing next to him when he did it. That is a different story, and a good one. On the 2nd of May, 1998, in a corridor at Hogwarts that smelled of dust and smoke and rain coming through a hole in a roof, Percy Weasley found his brother. He had a brown ministry folder under his arm. He had carried it out of a drawer on level 2 4 days earlier and had not let go of it since. Inside were 11 exercise books, in order, with a reference number on the cover of the first one. Percy did not make a speech. He was extremely bad at those, and he knew it by then. "They filed you under Potter and Granger," he said. "I have amended it. And that is where I want to leave them. Not in the Great Hall, not at the end. 3 people standing in a corridor at Hogwarts with a folder of old paper between them, one of them with an arm that would never quite close over properly. And the whole thing having started 6.5 years earlier, in a different corridor in the same castle, at 1 o'clock in the dark, with a troll on the floor, and 2 names on a page. There were 3 names on it now. It had taken a broken wall, a forged letter, and a boy with a mirror from a junk shop. And it should not have taken any of that, and it did. If you got this far, you are a real one. Subscribe. And tell me in the comments whether Ron was right to lie to them, because I have argued myself into both answers, and I'm still not sure which one I believe.